Hi, and welcome to DCO Graphics Studio. In the last video for part 1, it was more of a time-lapse where I shared the process for creating this connection. And what I want to show in this second portion is kind of continuing on with the script, taking this connection and creating some openings here to create some, the opening for the nuts and bolts that would connect this all the way through, or there could be lag bolts too. So let's go ahead and kind of move into here. Now I'm going to unplug everything here because I don't want to preview the color. I want to preview just the beam here, and I want to preview also the connection here. Now I want to go back also and see where our post is, which is here. Now what we want to do is create one hole here and one here. The easiest way to do that is to find our base form for this top part and try to work off of the corner points. So let's do that. Let's find that form, and so I'll click around here and see that this is the bottom part. Here we have the top part, and right before that we have the step where we have the Boolean difference, and right before that we have this box. So if I go here to only preview the geometry selected, you'll see that we have this box. Now what we want to do is get these points, move them down and in, and that will give us the points where we can create the openings. Now there are different ways of achieving this because parametrically we can technically use any of the points within the algorithm to work off of, but for now let's see if we go back to this one, which is the same. This is where we moved it down, so this would be the one that we would use. And the best way, or one way, would be deconstruct BWrap. And we'll bring this down here. And we'll disable the preview here. And we'll actually go to draw geometry, so we can see that we have all of this. Now let's disable the preview on this connect. Actually, we need to bring this back. Now that we have basically all of the vertices here, we want to only select these two. So what we do is we go to list item, and we'll plug in the vertices into the list. As you can see, automatically it selects this one here. So we could either change the number by adding more here and then selecting them with a point. So let me show you. This would be one way, is kind of keep adding the number of points. So you'll see that every time you add one, it adds one of the points that is there. So we have a total of 7 points. It's actually going to be 8, including 0. We can take out of those using a point component. Just take out the ones that you need. Or, so let's go here to our minus sign and just bring it back to our regular output. And now we're going to go to an index. So sometimes this is better, is going to a slider and kind of cycling through, seeing which one it is. The other thing is you can do a point list, and this will also give you the number of the points that it is, so you can just plug it in. Sometimes visually this kind of works, so we want this corner one and we want this next one. So if you want an additional one, I'll copy a slider, holding down shift, I'll add another input and then slide it over. So now we have 4 and 5, which are the ones that we want to keep, and you can either keep it as a slider or just delete this and then go to integer, set multiple integers. Let's do this again. And then here do the numbers, right? 2 and 4. What was it? 2 and 3. So let's go here. Let's go here. So we can always change them, right? So if it's not these, I think it was 4 and 5. Cool. Here's the thing. Since they're both inside of the same one, we wouldn't want to do that. We could always go plus here. So we have 2 outputs here. Actually, that doesn't work because that's trying to do another one. So sometimes if we're trying to do them individually, we'll just go to list item and just pull out one with this one. So we'll do index here, set integer 4, and then I'll copy this down, right click here, set integer 5. So we know those 2 points are the ones we want. Now what we do to one is going to be the opposite to the other, and you'll see that in a second. So now that we have these points extracted, you can see that we're going to move this down. So both of them actually will be going down in the Z direction. So we'll go to move this point. In which direction? In the Z direction, unit Z. And now we're going to do a negative component because we want it to go down in the Z direction. So we're moving it down by how much? Well, this is where we get to pick, right? So it's going to be, you know, 3 inches from the outside. Then I'll bring in a slider of 3. And so that's brought that down a unit 3. And it's a little bit too jumpy, so I will go here and go to floating point numbers, rounding it to 3 decimal points, which should be good enough. So let's say 1.5 inches from the top, or 2 inches from the top. And we're going to do the same thing to the one above. So we'll take this, copy it, holding down Alt, and plugging this in to the next one. So now, as you can see, since we brought them down, we can now take this and disable the preview on the ones before, because those were kind of the step before. Now with this, we're going to move this in the negative Y direction, and you can see that here. And then we're going to be moving this one in the positive Y direction. So once again, we're going to bring in a move, and we're going to bring in a unit Y, because we're going to move this one in the positive Y. And we could copy this slider here. And this way we don't have to recreate it. And then this is going to be, you know, slot location or bolt location. Bolt location 1. And this would be bolt location 2. The last thing that we need to do is do this again to this one. So copy that up. But as you can see, we just have to change this to a negative value. And there's other ways of doing this. I just like to visually show it here. This way it's not lost inside of one of the components. And this is one of the reasons why I also like to use a slider sometimes, but then that introduces the error for someone to pull on the slider and then mess it up. So it really depends. Now let's take these, disable the preview, and now let's move that around and see that now we've located the 2 locations for the connection. Now that we have this, we need to create the opening, but the opening needs to be created on a plane, right? Like if I create a circle here, it's going to be created on a XY plane. So let's bring in a YZ plane and place it right at the location of those points. So YZ plane, and you'll see that there'll be a construction plane created at those points, which is perfect because we can now create a circle at exactly that plane, and then do the same thing. Well, plug this point in also, and now our radius is going to be the size, right? So 0.125. So bolt size, diameter. And so everything works off of this. And the reason why we're only doing it to one side is because we can extrude this all the way through and then subtract it from both sides at the same time. So we can take this circle, and now to extrude it and for it to be a solid, we can extrude it and then cap it, or I like to use boundary surface to create a plane first, then extrude. So I'll disable the preview on that circle, and here go to extrude. Oh shoot. Extrude surface, or extrude, and we'll extrude this surface, and we can obviously here extrude it in the X direction, which would be the appropriate direction, or we can also use amplitude. It depends on what you rather use. Amplitude is useful if the angle is going to change. For this one, we're not going to change it, so we'll just go to unit X. This way we know that it'll extrude this way a certain amount, right? Now, as you can see, we've extruded a factor of 1, but I want to extrude the factor of the beam thickness plus the material of the connection. And for that, we should have all the information here, right? So if we look here, connection height, connection offset, I think the beam size is going to be determined right before this geometry with this rectangle, right? So with this rectangle, we see here that we have, it's the 5.5 plus the thickness of the material. So 5.5 plus 0.13 plus 0.13. So 0.13 times 2. So as you can see, we have those two. So the connection plus the tolerance. But I think that should be fine. So the tolerance is going to be there, and then, so let's do that. The connection, 13, or 0.13 times 2. So we'll do times 2. Now what comes out of here is 0.26, and we'll do plus 5.5. And that gives us the result of 5.76, which is going to be our overall extrusion. And if we need to add to it, we can, because since we're doing a Boolean difference, now we can take a look here in top view to see if it extrudes all the way through. And as you can see, we're missing a tiny bit here, so we'll just go to, when we add this, we'll just add times 3. And honestly, what matters the most is that it covers the whole thing. And the way to check that is to see if we change this, that's always going to change with it. That's the important thing, is that it's tied parametrically where it always intersects it. Hopefully that made sense. Sometimes it's a little bit confusing, but it should make sense. So in that sense, let's move forward. Now we have these surfaces. We'll disable the preview. Now we have these extrusions, which is perfect because that is what we need to subtract from our connection. We'll go to our connection here and we'll subtract from this overall form. But the other thing is we're gonna also want one down here. So we'll do the same process again for the bottom one here, create the circles and extrude them the same amount. We already have most of that work done. So let's go back here. There we are. This one is going to be actually a lot easier because you can just get the center point and that could be good enough. But let's go here with this one. Right before that is this. So rather than use this, I'll actually use something called boundary surfaces or bounding box. I'm going to do deconstruct brep. So basically explode that box so I can get this top edge. Here's the thing. We could either do the top edge or the bottom edge. The bottom edge might be better because we can then have a dimension from the bottom to the center of that. So it really depends on which direction you want to take it. But on this one, I think I'm just going to do one of these edges. I'll go to list item and pick one of these edges and see that it's not that one. So I'll cycle through using a slider. Like I said, oh, look at that. Number 5 is actually this top one, which is, thought that might be the one, but now let's go cycle through. So it's going to be the edge 1 out of all of the bounding box, and with this we'll get the midpoint, and this midpoint we can move. Let's move this down where we have the connection down here. Now we can take this midpoint and move it up, this time in the Z direction. And let's give it a number. So I'll just copy that bolt location. Now that we successfully created that, we can now just plug in this point into the circle, right? Because all of these extrusions were created from this base. Actually, it has to be created using XY plane or YZ plane. And that is what was plugged into the circle. So now, as you can see, I actually picked the edge on this side, so it's extruding it all the way through to the other side. Watch, I can just make sure that I pick the correct edge here. This is the bottom edge of the other side. So I just kind of cycled through number 3, which was the correct one. Now that we have these 3, now we can subtract those from the overall form, which is here. Let's go here to difference, solid difference. These are going to be our B, what we want to subtract, and what we want to subtract from is going to be our overall connection brep that we had before. And now we can disable the preview on all of this and this and see that we've successfully created that, except for we are previewing a bunch of stuff back here that probably not as critical to see now, which is this one. And now let's go back here and change the size. Show you how it all kind of works here. So as you can see, there's going to be a post here, a connection. There would be either bolts going all the way through, or bolts or lag bolts that connect right into here. Those are kind of two different ways. The other thing is, with those holes that we have all the way through, we could also create a hole right on the post and beam. So it really depends. With that being said, let's move some of these things too. I'm going to show the location of the bolt here. And you can also add more bolts, I guess, but for the most part, this is going to take care of those. All right. So now that we have here these circles, we can also in here create the bolts and the washers. That's going to be in the next portion, right? Because we need to offset this, create the entire kind of the next step to kind of finalize it, and either putting another bolt on the other side, or like I said, a lag bolt. So hopefully you found that interesting. I did want to make sure to do the second part fully explained. If you found that useful, let me know. Hopefully that made sense. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.